Welcome to Hello Port Hueneme. I'm your host Tom Dunn, and we are doing our second segment of this Mayor's Corner. And with us today is Mayor Tom Figg. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Today we're going to discuss the strategic action plan that the City Council voted to implement, and what I'd like to do is have you explain the various topics. I think we have it divided into 5 different areas that the council wants to focus on and look at of ways of trying to help the city become more financially viable and just help the community out and being a better place for us to live in.
Sure. Well, first let's look at 10,000 foot level. What is the plan?
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose of the plan? How is it organized? First and foremost, it's intended to give us a framework to move forward because we have an assortment of challenges. Financial is one of them, but when we get into coastal amenities, we also have ongoing recurring shoreline erosion. There's a whole host of things that the city's confronted with, and the purpose of the strategic plan is to build a strategy to deal with each and one of those challenges. Okay. Now, how is the document organized? 2 years ago, the city agreed upon through a strategic planning process 5 sets of goals. That's 2 years out. Now, it's been hit and miss since that time in order to meet the goals that we had set. And for a variety of reasons, we really didn't make a lot of headway. So this plan revisits the very set of goals that we had agreed upon as a council 2 years ago, and now really puts meat on the bones and has specific time frames of performance, specific measurements of what is it we're trying to accomplish, and what is the outcome that we expect to have. So just to give you kind of a broad overview of how did the document come to the way it is and what was its intent on that bigger level. So a good part of the program dealing with this first category of goals is to do just that. Let's take a look at the properties comprising the beach and properties surrounding the beach. Is there a way that we can develop uses that would advantage themselves to proximity to the beach?
There are you talking about like down the promenade and also at the other end of the beach down towards Ormond Beach, but all the way?
Correct. Hueneme Beach, that's owned by the city, is about 60 acres. And a lot of that is made up of parking lots and grassy knolls and undeveloped portions of the beach. It's those areas that we're looking at to see if we can make a higher and better use of those particular areas. And it's at both ends of the park. So that's one set of objectives, and we are having we've requested proposals from developers to take a look at those properties to see if they have the potential of generating a return for a developer's profit, and then that in turn would translate to income to the city. So that's a process that's now in place and being explored. The other part of the goals in the coastal amenities issue is to make sure that this wonderful asset we have doesn't fall in disrepair. A lot of complaints about our basic infrastructure of restrooms, picnic pads, swing sets, you name it, that have been neglected. And so part of this plan is intended to address those very things. The first and foremost is upgrading the level of maintenance at the beach restrooms. Developing a long-range capital improvement program to deal with capital replacement of things like swing sets and picnic pads, and even the restrooms themselves will probably have to be replaced. And then there's another component to all that, and it's shoreline erosion. I mean, are we just kind of swimming up the stream without a paddle, is that we put all this good money out there, but we're putting it at risk.
The beach does seem to come and go over a period of a year or two.
Oh, and it's getting shorter. The intervals are getting shorter, and the reason that is because the city's not getting the full share of sand replenishment that the Corps of Engineers is tasked to provide. Now, they're not the culprits. The culprits are in Washington, in Congress, because they appropriate the funds to provide for the Corps to do their biannual dredging bypass operation around the port of Hueneme.
The second section of the strategic action plan is to cultivate a high-performing organization. Could you explain what that means?
Sure. First and foremost, the city in the last 2 or 3 years has struggled internally. Its organization has been limping along. We've been without department heads in virtually all of our departments for a period of time. It's only been recently that we've got a full staffing arrangement at the executive level. Now we've got to rebuild the organization from within. It's a unique opportunity when a city manager who's new to the job also has the ability to select his own executive team. That's a rare occasion in local government that can happen. But in the meantime, we've got folks, the line personnel, that have been limping along, and morale is suffered as a result. There's been no raises for a number of years. People are burnt out. Because there's been some volatility on the city council, people have been, fearful of their jobs, and so part of the plan here is to rebuild that sense of ownership, sense of trust, a common vision internally that people can share, and develop a better sense of where we're going and confidence that we're going to get there. And so that's really what the purpose of that second goal set is, to really do things internal to make it a better place to work and to be a higher performing organization. Now there's subparts to that, like risk management. The city has been faced with a number of worker comp claims over the last couple of years, and that's translated to higher premiums that the city has to pay. And so part of the plan calls for an independent risk analysis to be made of our operations, making certain that people have the right equipment so that they aren't subject to injury, making sure training is available. The whole idea is to minimize exposure to risk. And so that's part of the component of making this a higher performing organization. And an example is that if somebody, particularly at the police department, is placed on leave because of an injury, we're already operating at a pretty lean level. And if you lose one of your officers for any length of time, 3 months, 6 months, that's going to translate to overtime. And that then is a budget killer. And so it's in our interest to be proactive in preventing injury and not responding to it. So that's kind of that category. It's to make sure that we're a lean, mean machine, but we're healthy too.
From top to bottom.
Top to bottom.
Number 3 is maintain infrastructure at a higher level.
Right. I think people have appreciate the fact that when you drive Port Hueneme streets, it's a whole different experience than driving streets in our next door neighbors.
Well, you don't have to dodge potholes, is that right?
Well, yeah. Now, that's also at risk. I mean, we took, the city's council, has taken great strides to make certain that our infrastructure is current and it's noticeably different from others. And they've invested over the years a lot in making sure that happens. But again, we're in a financial condition where resources are short, and we're going to have to figure a way of how do we keep our infrastructure at a high level that people can recognize it. Yeah, that's why I like to live in Port Hueneme, but how can we afford to continue to maintain it at that level? Well, there's a number of things. One is taking a look at what I call a capital replacement amortization. A lot of insurance people will say, well, the life expectancy of a street is 30 years. And therefore, you know, you've got to figure on when it reaches 30 years, you got to replace it. Well, I don't think that's necessarily, it may be the ideal, but it's not the most cost effective. It may be, well, wait a minute, the street doesn't have to be replaced in whole at the end of that 30-year period. It could last another 30 years for all we know. We don't know what point in time exactly that it will fail, but that means that we, in between that 30-year life period that expires until we ultimately have to replace the street, we have to do periodic maintenance to carry it on, okay, short of replacing it in whole. That then reduces the cost in our capital planning that takes away from the budget.
Gives you more money yearly.
Exactly.
Spread. Number 4 is enhance community involvement. And let me just state that when I first got involved with what was going on in the city a couple years ago, that was one of the first things I heard was, we don't seem to hear from them and they don't hear from us.
Yeah, and that's, you know, you're not alone in having heard that. I certainly heard it during the course of when I ran for office a couple of years ago. There seemed to be decisions being made without really engaging the community in the, you know, developing of opinions on things. Measure M was unfortunately an example of that, where there wasn't a whole lot of outreach. Regardless of the merits of the tax measure, it wasn't vetted the way it should have been among the public and stakeholders, those that would be most impacted. So anyway, yes, this has been a reoccurring theme for a long time. There's another reason why this has been a theme, is that we're one of very few communities that doesn't have a planning commission. And why is that? Because we're built out community. The planning commission serves as a sounding board for the city council. We don't have a sounding board for the city council.
And that's a communication vehicle between the community and the commission.
It's also something that, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of service organizations like a Rotary or a Lions Club. And so, again, planning commissions tended to be, in a lot of communities, still the case, is kind of a stepping stone to higher office, where you can, you know, cut your teeth on understanding the community and the politics of the community so that you're best positioned to run for office. We don't have a planning commission, and we don't have a civic organizations for people to develop that kind of relationship.
Nor do we have radio or TV or newspaper.
Yeah, that's becoming even more problematic. You're right.
Okay, the 5th category in the strategic action plan is create a substantial financial future. That's a biggie.
Yeah, that's a biggie. Yeah. Well, this is largely driven on the revenue side of the equation. What are vehicles out there that we can advantage ourselves with that will help fill this deficit that we have with an ongoing revenue stream? The city has reserve funds, still has reserve, but those are one-time capital dollars. Once they're gone, they're gone. And so a structural deficit means that we continue to we have municipal costs that are greater than the revenues we receive. And over the last 2 or 3 years, the city's done a lot to cut down its costs. I mean, we've reduced our staffing overall close to 20%. And we've decimated our recreational programs, things like movies in the park and a lot of other things that people enjoyed. Wainimi Beach Festival, another example. These were all the result of we've got to shore up our budget, and it all comes down to we need more money. Okay, and so a large part of this last goal set is to explore everything from a police tax measure, which is a dedicated source of money, but specifically allocated for public safety services, and that would be police, lifeguards, and crossing guards. Another is how can we incentivize, and I think you've stated in the past about, well, the city has close to 25% vacancy in its storefronts. How can we backfill these storefronts? Well, one way is to retool the city's business licensing ordinance and incentivize occupancy so that you start with a smaller business license fee or tax early on in the occupancy, and then gradually you increase it over time. And that allows that person to absorb those increases. And from the city's point of view, even though you're getting a break, it's still better to get a break and have an occupancy than nothing at all. So these are an assortment of possibilities that are being explored.
Thank you for explaining this to us.
Oh, anytime, my pleasure.
We need to know what's going on. Time is of the issue now, and the more we understand, the better off we are. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
See you at the next show.
You got it.